Jerod, one of the most common questions I get from emerging founders that are just starting out in franchising, it's where am I going to find my first franchisee or first, half dozen? Where did you guys find your first dozen franchise owners?
Yeah, great question. So, as I mentioned, it was tougher than we thought. We did a lot of smiling and dialing, but eventually we finally got our first one, right? Our first one came a little under a year into when we started offering or having an
Hmm.
executed franchise agreement and an FDD. And it was tough. We had joined the IFA prior to, we had a solid franchise agreement and FDD. We started joining broker groups as well to be able to kind of expand the name. And we just started buying leads and doing whatever we could to bring people in. And so had I gone back and done anything different, I would have invested a lot more money into the website and bringing that in as more of a powerhouse up front
Okay.
to have that for years into the future. But given what we did, it was tough to get that first one. Once we got the first one, you know, it started snowballing a little bit. By 2018, we launched our first three locations. And then over the next 2 years, we launched another dozen. And so the first one was tough, but it's like, okay, now we got it. Now we can actually start implementing in all these trainings and the support and the launch process and all these things we've finally been working on. We get to,
Right.
we get to do it, right? And so now we also have somebody to validate and tell everybody else what it was like to work with us. And so that was
Absolutely.
a big turning point.
Yeah. So were the source of your first franchisees from the broker groups or from the website or from the trade show that you did? Where did you find them?
The very first franchisee was introduced to us through it was, oh my gosh, Franchise Gator, I believe, was our
Okay. So one of the
very
web
first,
portals.
was a web portal. Yeah.
Okay.
We were part of multiple portals. I think our first three territories that we sold were from portals. And then we started getting in a trickle of consultant, broker leads. And well, it was really hard with brokers when you didn't have one.
Of course.
Once you had a little bit more validation, they were a little more willing to kind of jump on board. And so after I'd say the first three, we've had pretty much up until this last year or so, pretty much a 50-50 split on broker franchisees, referred franchisees, and like everything else.
It's organic. Okay.
Yeah.
But Jared, what type of person do you think it takes to thrive in your system? Have you noticed any common threads among your most successful franchisees?
Yes. So number one, most certainly will be that they align with our values, right? Are
Hmm.
we are care, compassionate, accountable, respectful, and ethical. Right? They have to have a passion for this business and a reason as to why they're doing this business. And we can pull that why out of them, and we know they're in it for the right reason. They've been personally touched in one way or another from circumstances, whether positively or negatively, surrounding senior care and that kind of end of life experience. It's like those are hitting, big, lights are going off saying, hey, okay, here we go. This person really does. They want to start a business, but they want to start a business with a purpose. And
Right.
so being aligned with our values, having that why, those are the things that when the times get tough, as it does in any business, we go
Hmm.
back to with coaching and say, hey, you remember why you're here? Remember the experiences that you had and you wanted to ensure that people going forward wouldn't have those kind of experiences? Well, you're the one who's making that difference. So, stand up, shake it off, and let's go.
Right. Yeah, entrepreneurship is not easy, but if they have your support and help motivate you and remembering their why, there's nobody else to do that for them. That's the beauty of a franchise system, right? Is that you guys get an opportunity to coach them when we know entrepreneurship is alone. It's a lonely business.
Yeah. Which brings me on to my next characteristic is being coachable.
Mm.
We have turned down people in the past who came to us saying, "This is how I'm going to change your system. These are the things I'm going to
Oh gosh.
implement. This is and it's like, hey, that's great. Please,
Hmm.
please feel free to do all those things, just not with us.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you're here to gain the value of everything we've learned. To not make the mistakes we have, to have support in so many different ways by your side,
Mhm.
but we're not reinventing the wheel, right, with you. So most certainly being coachable, making sure that, we're bringing someone in who's willing to learn for sure.
That's smart.
leveraging the network, being a part of what's bigger than all of us right now, which really is our network and our franchisees, be willing to help them as well as take feedback from them. We literally have an open source where questions are being asked and answered like 24 hours a day. And that's from our franchisees just wanting to help others and make sure that they can kind of pay it forward. Our veterans are on there just as much as our newbies, putting in information and helping each other out. But lastly, I would say kind of the key characteristics. We do that Zoracle profiling and whatnot, but we very much are societal and achievers. So it's like we want to help people, but we want to like do it better than anyone else.
Right,
That's
right.
that's what we're looking for.
Fantastic. What's the investment range of the franchise opportunity?
Currently, we're between about 90 and 165,000 is the initial investment range.
And how does that range because of the size of the territory or where it is? How does that work?
The primary difference in that range is going to be your own operational structure. If you're coming in like a husband and a wife partnership, that's one less employee that you are going to be hiring.
Okay.
The other big swing on that initial investment range is covering labor. So labor is a great initial investment and it's a great initial expense because that means you're also billing. Right.
Hmm.
But labor is the number one initial expense franchise fee as well. But outside of franchise fee, when you're launching, if you launch and you're getting clients hand over fist, before the clients pay, you're paying the caregivers. So you need to have a decent reservoir of cash reserves to be able to pay the caregivers as you're collecting from your clients, especially when you're brand new and you're just kind of learning your collections process. It's like, yeah, we may have taught you, we may have worked with you on it, but now it's real time. It's like, oh gosh, I actually have to deliver the bill and I have to make sure I get paid. And what about
Sure.
the payroll and all these things and making sure they get it all right. So that's kind of one of the larger parts of that initial investment.
And Jerod, if I'm a franchisee, obviously this all comes down to me getting caregivers, right? I mean, they're the front line. And tell me about how I go about doing that and how difficult that is. And how many caregivers do I generally need when I'm opening up a franchise initially?
Yeah. Oh, great. Great questions. So from the time we opened, the industry number one, being a part of Home Care Association of America and looking at all the industry trends and a lot of the data and reports that are coming from there and other sources, labor's always been the number one concern
Hmm.
and really remains the number one concern on any service business. Um, Really any business that involves people, it continues to be one of the biggest concerns, right? But of course, our business, the backbone is the people. We don't have a business if it's not for caregivers. And
Right.
so it's a focus, number one, of finding the right people. And then, of course, number two is being able to retain them. So that's kind of the tricky part. You can find people. Not always as easy to find the good ones, but retaining
Hmm.
them is kind of where the magic happens. So throughout the years, our training processes and our employee our hiring processes have changed significantly. We've been able to implement in technology to help us on the front end with ATS, applicant tracking software, to where it's very mobile friendly. It's eliminating barriers that normally may disqualify somebody before they even come into your front door.
Hmm.
Our hiring process used to take about 2.5, almost 3 weeks to be able to complete. That was through multiple interviews, face-to-face interviews and orientations and getting all the paperwork done. We can do it in like a day now and still have great people so long as they use the technology, they complete the forms that they need to come in, of course, for that final orientation. We've been able to really greatly reduce the barriers up front. So that's bringing on the good ones. Now, we do something a little differently. We actually include orientation into a part of our hiring process. And although they may
Hmm.
be hired, if they're not showing up on time, involved in orientation, not on their phone, respectful. But that's kind of like our final test to see if they can make it through into the system. If they can't, here's your paycheck. It's your first and final. Thank you so much. If they can, fantastic. You've made it through our final process, and let's move forward into care, caring for seniors. And so that's one item, right? The best offense is a good defense. So making sure we're bringing in
Hmm.
the right people. To continue to train and develop them, that's the next trick, right? We need to show people coming into us who are caregivers, CNAs, CMAs, that we're not just a job. We're not just another stepping point in their career or just another care agency. And we show them that there's a way to be able to develop their skill sets into potentially administrative roles, into potentially referral-based roles, or marketing roles, as well as office management roles. So we have like a career path to show a caregiver, you may start here, but here are all the different ways you can grow with us, all the way up into, someday you may be even a franchise owner, right? And so it really shows them their path and what it could be with a place at home. Now, we've also invested in multiple LMS systems, so learning management software, to make sure we're continuing to develop them, train them, make sure that their skills are the best that they could possibly be. And all of those will help for retention. The culture that our franchisees build with their care staff and with their administrative staff is going to flow right down to the caregivers and right into the experience that the clients receive. So it has to be something that they want to be a part of, that they believe in, and that they see their role as a part of the bigger picture of the companies. Owners who can really embody that and really push that down all the way to it being seen through the senior's eyes and the care that they receive, those are the ones that have the best retention rates, right? They're getting awarded in industry as best of home care providers and best home care employers. Now, the size of a location, that is really going to be dependent. You're only as big as however many caregivers you have to be able to deploy. The growth trajectory is different depending on a lot of different circumstances, especially the one in the driver's seat, the franchisee. How much foot they have on the gas pedal is going to be a big determinant on their speed of growth. But we're looking right out of the gate. They're going to be needing to hire about 3 to 5 caregivers when they start. That'll get them up to roughly almost about 100 hours a week, and to the point to where now they always need to be really that 3 to 5 caregivers ahead of their growth. Why is that? Well, at any given time, we can have kind of that holy grail mecca, that 24/7 client who comes in. Usually it's a Friday at like 4 o'clock and everybody's checking out, and it's like, oh, wait, you want to start when? Tonight? Okay. And I'm looking at my caregiver base and it's like, oh gosh, well, this is really tight. Well, we need the ability to be able to plug in some caregivers at any given time so we're not turning down business. So it's a push and a pull. But I would say by the time you're doing about 500,000 so in revenue, you're going to have about 20 to 25 caregivers. And then by the time you're hitting roughly $1 million, depending on the area will be very dependent on number of hours per client. In higher, more average areas, we're looking at, a caregiver base of about 40 to 55 or so for that $1 million business. And then kind of moving on to that $2 million business is going to be closer to that 100 mark or so in number of employees.
How big of an area does my franchise cover if I was a franchise owner?
We go on senior population. 40,000 senior population is what we look for. We use mapping software and build an awkwardly shaped zip code specific territory that's going to get about as close to that 40,000 mark as possible. Okay. We do offer multiple, territory expansion, and depending on the geography, potentially through one kind of HQ or one operation center. So geography wise, it really just depends on how dense and where you are, geographically and metropolitan or more rural. But 40,000 seniors usually equals between about 300 to 500,000 total population.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.